Hi YouTube, welcome back to Nutkin Farm. Well, as harvest time approaches, there's nothing that grows faster than the grass, and we're looking now at block 1, which I mowed a week ago, and having a look around here now, it's almost due for its next one, just a week later. I don't think I'll do it quite yet, but I won't let it get to the proportions I did before. Anyway, this time of year is when I choose to do my macadamia baby parade. I am an experimental kind of bloke. I have been experimenting with many kinds of baby macadamias to see how they mature, and down the track I want to see how they crop as well. And so I document this. This is my second time doing it. I have added a few varieties to the list now. I now am growing, I think, 11 total different varieties of babies on Nutkin Farm. I'm only going to be doing the 9 that I've had some experience with, so we're not including the A38 and the 741, which I've only just got recently and only barely planted out. I can't include them in the results for this year because I would just be guessing at how good or otherwise they are. But there are 9 to go through, and I've got my own reasons for rating them how I do, but let's start. Okay, starting with number 9. I've whinged about this before, so it may not be a surprise to many of you. This is Variety G, and it hasn't really had the best time of it. There is some new growth, not very much. I've, read the literature and read that it's quite a hungry tree for nitrogen, so I'm trying to feed it some more, but it is dead last this year, and there's absolutely no doubt in my decision about that. That was planted back in April, I think, this year, and has really put on very little height. And it's interesting because if you look at other Variety Gs, and I got a bunch of them, I don't know how many exactly, but you tend to see the same result repeat itself in the Gs. They're consistently underperforming relative to others that I bought from the same nursery at the same time and fared exactly the same way. So that's another G there. Not, the new flush that did grow is already sort of browning off, and you'll compare that with other ones later on where I'll show you why others have performed better. So that's G. Coming in at number 8, the 842. It's put on a bit of growth since I've put it into the ground. It hasn't been the most vigorous growth though. It was already a fairly advanced tree when I put it in the ground. So yes, while it looks bigger than the Gs, most of that was growth that happened at the nursery. So it doesn't get credit for that. I make some allowances for how long the things have been in the ground and how big they were when they were started. And on that basis, 842, well, yet to show solid growth. Perhaps one to watch for next year. This is number 7, Variety J. Now this tree came to me as a monster thanks to Tim Hills. He'd put it in a great big nursery pot, not the usual little bags or pots that you get saplings in. And so, obviously doesn't get credit for all that growth, but it's put on a bit. You can see at the top branches, the lighter green leaves, it's put on a bit of growth, but probably a bit less than I would have expected in the circumstances. It looks like a strong tree. It looks like it'll develop into a strong specimen, but it's not impressing the socks off me just yet. Again, one to watch for next year. And coming in at number 6, Variety P. Now, like the J that you've just seen, I bought this one as a monster, and it's put on a bit more growth, and you can see quite clearly the light green at the tops of the branches. But again, for a huge tree, it probably could have done a little better. Those massive green leaves will build on new growth, and the flush clearly isn't over yet on the Variety P. I also brought a couple of smaller Variety Ps that were standard size, and they've done very little. So possibly a bit of a slow starter, even though they're meant to be a quick cropper. But there we go. That's my choice for number 6 this year. Number 5, variety R. Now, we're starting to get into the better varieties now, and you can see quite clearly the growth this fella's put on. Interesting, you can make a comparison with, between number 5 and number 9, the Variety G. These little trees were exactly the same size when I got them, and yet this Variety R has had now 2 flushes of growth, and this second flush is even bigger than the first one. It's really putting on some height. It's becoming quite a nice substantial tree, and it's got lots of nice green new foliage. So quite impressed with Variety R, and looking forward to planting some more of those this autumn. Here's number 4, MCT1. And in fact, last year it was 4th out of 4, and it in fact was a dead last. But that's when I only had 4 baby varieties on trial. This has come good, actually, and it's come good across multiple trees in my plot of MCT1s. Lots of new green healthy growth, bushing out nicely. These were all planted at a reasonably small size, and while it's not 100% consistent, there's certainly a good spread of nice vigorous growth, bushing out nicely. And in fact, if you've seen some of my YouTubes with Matty Kelby on his own farm, it's bushing up much like the trees do on his place. So quite impressed with MCT1. After a slow start, it's actually started to come good, and you know, a worthy addition to the place. And coming in at number 3, the 835. Also 3rd last year, but again 3rd in a much more competitive field. These trees, which are rare, big rustly green leaves, descendant of the 246, one of the earliest cropping and crunchiest macadamia nuts you can grow, but not really grown anymore anywhere, is turning out to be a real solid grower on my farm, and it has just gone ahead in leaps and bounds. It's also very consistent across the other 835s that I planted. There's more than 10 of them, and they're all showing the same characteristics of growth. Excellent tree. Looks like it's forming up beautifully, and it's a spreading tree as well. So looking forward to great things from the 835. Here's number 2. I actually had to stand back with the camera for this. The 788. What a tree. It is growing like topsy, just the same way it did last year. Number 1 last year. It's number 2 this year, reluctantly, but there's a special reason for it. But wow, what a tree. You know, my head height, just to give you an indication, my head height is about here on the tree. And that's how much further. I mean, it's got to be 9 foot high. And for a tree that hasn't been in the ground 2 years, that is an incredible rate of growth. The 788 is prized in South Africa and also China, but again, not grown much in New South Wales. It was given a trial, but wasn't really given a fair trial, in my opinion. This tree has got probably a great future ahead of it. And that brings me to number 1. The granddaddy of them all, the first really commercially promoted Hawaiian variety, the 246, turns out to be the winner for this year. It's got growth on all angles, not only bushing up nicely, but climbing well, getting a thick trunk, nice and early too, which is a good sign of a nice stable tree. The 246 is the original big fat macadamia tree, so in a way it's not surprising to see that. But the reason this was number 1 instead of the 788, I have to show you another 246, a slightly smaller one. You may have seen this before. I laughed when this tree put on flowers, and I laughed when it put on baby nuts, and I claimed that this tree had no business putting on a crop at all because it's way too young. It's about 2 years too early. And when it did put on baby nuts, I just assumed it would drop them all, but it hasn't. It's kept 2 nuts to absolute full term. These are going to be the first nuts I have grown from scratch at Nutkin Farm, and I would have expected it on the MCT1 or the P, or one of the varieties that's meant to crop in 3 years, but not one that's meant to crop in 6 or 7 years. So this has won, because it's going to give me my first nuts. This has won number 1 for this year. What a great performer, the 246, a stalwart of the Northern Rivers, in fact a stalwart of the industry everywhere, and a fitting winner for this year's crown. So congratulations 246, you've done great, and we'll see if you can keep it up next year. Thanks for watching, everyone. That's my macadamia baby roundup for 2021. And I hope to be able to do this again in a year's time.